introduce you to the great, the wonderful Ariane Parham. How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Oh man, life is good. Now, y'all, like I said, you are in for a treat. This conversation, I'm really excited about it. Ariane is the co-founder of Macon Black Tech with his wife Christelle. They're just doing incredible work in the innovation space and inclusion space, making space for Black tech entrepreneurs. I love what you're doing over there. Also, the leader of HamTECH Solutions, consulting firm, doing beautiful work there as well. And your journey has been incredible. I want to hear this. Like, how did you get to now actually running a full tech incubator, a Black centric tech incubator out in Georgia? How did you get, what was that journey like for you, Ariane?
For sure. Well, one, thank you for having me. Definitely say hello to the audience out there.
Yeah.
So I pretty much came out the womb with a computer in my hand. Now I'm just I'm just joking. No, so actually it all started when I had broke one of my aunt's typewriters.
Okay.
That's the beginning.
Wow. So you're back in the typewriter days. I love
Yes,
this. That's
yes,
a great origin
right,
story.
right.
Right.
So
Doing calculations on an abacus and everything.
there we go. There we go.
I,
No, so I had saw her typewriter in the closet, and I was like, wow, this is really nice. That does age me. Wow, now that I think about a typewriter, right?
yeah.
But no, so I saw it and it looked really nice. And this was like more of your fancier type version.
Yeah.
And so I saw a port in the back and I thought that it was a VGA port. And so I was like, I can type and then hook up a monitor, right?
Wow.
But it ended up actually being a serial port. So when I put it in, like sparks flew, and I was like, "Oh my gosh! Oh no, what have I done?"
How old were you at this time?
Man, I had to be probably maybe 10, 11,
Sure.
somewhere in there.
Sure.
And my uncle was there with me. He's a little bit younger, but he was probably maybe like 18, 19, 20. He was the
Yeah.
youngest of his siblings. And so I don't know. I just figured that it was the right thing, right? I'm like typewriter, make it into a computer. Let's make this happen.
Love it.
And then obviously that was a no go, and I definitely got in trouble by my aunt, and she was like, "I'm not leaving you alone in my house ever again." And so fast forward though, in middle school, so that was sort of like the start where I started tinkering with things, like taking computers apart, sort of
Mhm.
messing with different things. And so when I got to middle school, I think that's when computer games online was starting to get big, like
Yeah.
Flash Player,
Yeah.
playing basketball online and all this other stuff. It was pretty new. And so sometimes like my teacher's computer would mess up, especially when we're trying to like play games and all this other stuff. And so
Yeah.
she saw that I was good on the computer, and so she would call me to sort of fix the computer, which was kind of dope now that I think
Mhm.
about it. But yeah, so around like Christmas time, she was a really nice teacher. She was a math teacher, and so around Christmas time, she gave gifts. And so when she handed out gifts, I saw that she was giving everyone a pencil. And then when I like sort of looked in my bag, I saw that she had gave me a calculator, and I was like, "Hey, let's
Wow.
go!" And then I was tripping over a calculator, but it was dope at the time because I was different. Like, and she was just saying, I appreciate all the help that you give with the computer, and so
Mhm. And
that
I see something different in you.
exactly, and that
Yeah.
was just reinforcement. Not only that, like also in middle school, it's crazy. We had do you remember and one basketball?
Uh-huh.
So we sort of created an and two version of that, and
Yes.
we were trying to figure out how we were going to raise money. And so I ended up creating a website to try to raise money on like these like really old school website builders. But obviously, we didn't
Wow.
raise any money. But if
Wow.
anyone was
Oh, that's
curious
great.
what my name was, it was Nasty Ripper. I was like,
Okay. Okay.
anyway.
That's great. That's great. That is absolute gold. I want to highlight a few things. One
Mhm.
is, your aunt. I'm sure your aunt is amazing. How often, though, adults, it's like you get angry at the part that, okay, yeah, okay, you could be angry, your typewriter broke.
Mhm.
But then there's also a part that I feel like we could do better as adults to encourage in children, in young people, where it's like, hey, I love the courage. I love the innovation. I love that you tried something and like, yeah, I'm upset that my typewriter is broken,
Yeah, right.
but you know, like I forget what movie. I think it's like Jimmy Neutron or some one of these movies where it's like you failed, like congratulations. You know, like this no, because it means
Right.
you tried, right? And there's this like congratulatory and I feel like for children, and then also, you know, for entrepreneurs, a lot of our audience here is entrepreneurs. I wish we applauded failure more often, you know, and said
Sure.
like, hey, you went out and you tried something, congratulations. You know, if you put like if you post, hey, I got a new car, you get 100 likes on
Right.
social media, right? You post, hey, I got a new job, you get 100 likes. But if you post, hey, I tried something and you know it didn't quite work out, or even I tried something, you know, you don't get hardly, you know, any support on that. And I
That's
feel
true.
like we could do better to celebrate failure. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's a
On the
deep.
level of like innovation or the courage it takes to innovate.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely attest sort of like my ambition and will and curiosity to those moments. And I appreciate, like, I don't remember my aunt sort of like reprimanding me in the sense of like, don't ever do anything like that again. It was more
Right.
so like, you broke this expensive piece of equipment, you
Right.
know? But
Right. Valid. We love you, Auntie. Like that's valid.
right, exactly. And so I have a podcast, and I started going through some of these thoughts, and it was crazy. I had to text her after that. Like I contacted her, and I was just like, I appreciate you for that because I never knew, right? And a lot of things that we do as kids sort of sets us up for adults. So I think,
Yeah.
just like you mentioned, being able to encourage that curiosity, especially when it comes to tech.
Yeah.
And I know it can be scary, right? Especially for parents. Christelle and I, we don't have any kids yet, but you know, obviously you hear about social media, you know, young
Mhm.
kids having technology and all these different things. But I believe that if you can introduce them to sort of like the kid-friendly versions of a lot of these tech coding and sort of applications, I think it does really well.
Mm.
Just to, I mean, especially when you're young, because it encourages you to think deeper, right? And so when you get on the computer, you don't feel like you have to like this is hard work essentially when you're on a computer trying to research and
Right.
find out things. So I think it just sets you up for life, like when you're younger, being able to explore just those different things.
I love that. We got Jonathan Till in the house, good friend of mine, doing beautiful, beautiful work. Says, love it. Celebrating effort over outcomes could be a game changer. I agree. I agree. And obviously, you know, the outcomes need to happen, but we should be celebrating effort. We should be
Mm-hmm.
celebrating attempts. You
Mm-hmm.
know, as long as you're not making the same mistakes over and over, like we should be
Mm-hmm.
celebrating attempts because that's how you grow. So I love that. And then I
Yeah.
also want to shout out your teacher. That was the next piece, and just how powerful it is to have somebody see you. And I mean see
Mm-hmm.
you here, you know, like see beyond what you're currently doing and say, hey, I see something in you and I want to nurture that, you know,
For
by
sure.
giving you this calculator or whatever it is, or even, you know, calling you back up like, hey, can you fix this again?
Right.
And I also wonder how many times the stuff was actually broken, you know, or how many times she was just doing the things to encourage,
That's a
you
good
know,
question.
getting you back out there, right? And
That's a good question.
yeah, and but I love that she saw something in you and encouraged that. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners right now could think of a moment in their life where somebody saw something, even in their adult life, somebody saw something bigger and called them to greater heights. I want you
Mm-hmm.
to put that in the chat. If you got anybody to shout out who has, you know, invested in your life in some way and seen something bigger in you, I love to hear what that is. How are you now translating that spirit
Mm-hmm.
into the work that you're doing at Macon Black Tech? What has grown out of that? And I'd love to hear, you know, kind of the story leading up to that. But I really want to hear, you know, what are you grabbing from that teacher and moving forward in your life? What are you holding on to, and what are you doing for and with these entrepreneurs that you work with?
For sure. So, Making Black Tech, it's we are about creating a safe space for tech and innovation. And this was sort of like birthed out of the idea. One, we went to this Atlanta Black Tech event and we were like, hey, why can't this be in Macon?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the initial idea came from. But then after that, we had there's a thing that they do here called On the Table. And it's essentially where we get a bunch of people together in different groups, and we talk about maybe max 12 people to a table, and we talk about different topics. And we decided, my wife and I, we decided to host a tech table, a tech discussion. And one of the things that came out of that discussion was that tech was intimidating. And so, like, for me, growing up in tech, right, like from young, the idea of it being intimidating just wasn't on my mind. And of course, I think that's a whole nother conversation, just the biases that we have. But that sort of encouraged us. It was like, okay, now game one, this is what we need to do. And then on top of that, it was like, okay, we want to be able to create a space where we nurture people for the things that we didn't have when we were trying to start, right? So the company HamTECH Solutions, it was really difficult starting initially. I didn't really have anybody there to sort of mentor me as I went along. And it wasn't until I started reaching out to different people, just saying, hey, I see that you're doing this or that, you know, can we have a conversation? And I was able to eventually grab a couple mentors, but it's like for that long stretch initially, there wasn't any there. And so tackling the idea of tech not being intimidating, but also being able to foster and nurture sort of like this space, as we mentioned before, like it's okay to fail, right? Like it's okay to sort of ask those dumb questions. You don't have to feel like when you walk into our space or come to any of our events or anything like that, like you have to know it all, right? So if there's any tech jargon or anything that we mention in terms of innovation or tech, please feel free to ask those questions, right? And so like right now we have this program called Makeathon, and it's essentially like a hackathon and an accelerator mixed together. Right? So with a hackathon, you're typically fighting. I mean, you're trying to solve a problem like in a day or on a weekend or whatever. But with an accelerator, you know, you add all this like mentor classes and all this over like a 3 to 6
for our
months.
audience, if we could pause, hackathon. Now, this is a new concept for me, so I want to say, like, again, with the tech jargon and things like that, for people who don't live in the tech space, what is a hackathon and how does that work?
So essentially with the hackathon, and many people put it on like Google, a lot of your tech companies and developing sort of organizations where they'll say, hey, it's sort of like a conference, right? You come to a conference and they say, you need to try to break into, let's just keep it simple. You need to break into this computer and figure out what's wrong with it, right? So they may have like planted malware, viruses, and there's different types of hackathons, right? Just giving this one simple example. So essentially, you have this challenge, right? You have people either in teams or individually, and they're all trying to figure out like what's wrong with this particular device or what's going on with this computer, and then whoever's able to get it first, then obviously they win a prize, right? And so there's other versions out there where it's like Developer Week. They put on one where they pull together all these different like tech companies, and you know, like they try to solve different product issues and challenges.
So you guys are putting that on now. What does that look like for you all?
So essentially, again, like with the hackathon mixed with an accelerator. Of course, accelerator, again, as I mentioned, it's just it's where you nurture and build up an entrepreneur, right? You offer them classes, mentorship, all these various things. And then at the end, when they graduate, you know, they're supposed to like take off, right? That's the whole idea. And so with what we're doing, we broke it down into 4 groups of 4 people. And each of the groups have a challenge that's related to social impact here in Macon. And so we partner with the city of Macon, another organization, and a couple of other organizations for those challenges. And so essentially, as they're building, they're also building individually because they're getting classes on marketing, they're getting classes on like design thinking, innovation, and all those various things, and being introduced to the concept. And what I appreciate, right, because we really target sort of like the underrepresented community, minority, Black. And so
I just heard something on the word underrepresented that I want to put out publicly because I thought it was so good. So it was a post that had underrepresented and it was scratched out and it said historically excluded.
Oh, there we go. I like that.
Right, let's not soften the language, you know. And this is this week, and I thought it was so good. Let's not soften the language and talk about, oh, these are, you know, underrepresented, because that kind of feels passive.
Right.
They're just not represented.
Right.
They're just not here. So no. How about we talk about historically excluded? You know, as a firmer way of saying what it really is. Yeah, keep going, man. Keep going.
So essentially, what we appreciate about this group is that you have, you know, the person who's an artist, right? Like they paint, and they've never done anything related to tech, right? To like a doctor, right? To you know, a diversity and equity sort of like instructor.
Right.
It's just a gamut of people.
I love that.
And we love it. Even a TikTok influencer we have here.
I love it.
So
I love the accessibility, and I want to hear from you more specifically, because tech, the phrase you said about tech being intimidating, I think is a fact for a lot of people, that they feel, sorry, it's not intimidating, but you are intimidated by this, especially when we think, you know, tech, I got to be a developer, a coder, I got to, you know, all these different types of things. Can you bring it down to the most accessible way that you could explain how tech can solve problems in the world, that, you know, for someone who's entrepreneurial minded, you can be a tech entrepreneur without being a coder, without being like, you could be a TikTok influencer. I love that you're doing that. So break that down a little bit more for us.
Yeah, for sure. I think I sort of saw, I want to start by saying, like, I saw how tech started to blow up when I found out that they had servers and drones on farms. That's when it's like, okay, we're taking this to a whole nother level. And so when you think about tech is in any and everything, right? The most basic level is even your phone, right? There's so much you can do with your phone, as you talked about, being obviously a social media creator. I think obviously you have to learn how to shoot, you have to learn how to edit your videos, and you got to learn how to post, right? I think that's super basic level, but also even just typing a Word document. There's a lot of people who are intimidated, especially sort of like your older crowd who, you know, didn't really grow up with this, but sort of it was forced on them. Like, hey, we have a computer. Figure out
This is the world now, right?
Exactly. And so I think there is, when you talk about tech, it's just like saying, you know, name all the foods there are in the world, right? Like, tech is a part of any and everything. And so whatever industry you want to get into, there's some level of tech involved, right? So you have your programmers who create applications either on the web, on your phone, or on the computer. You have sort of like your cybersecurity people who are like me. And even cybersecurity, that's a whole nother world. So we can break off in all these different branches of tech, but essentially, as we move forward, you have to be involved in tech in some type of way.
Right. So now these entrepreneurs, they come together. What happens on the other side? Now tell me about the entrepreneurial piece. Like, they're taking this, you know, this problem, and now they're actually making a business case out of it. How does that work?
Right. So they're creating a solution. And so at the end of it, we're going to have demo day where they pitch in front of judges. And so whoever wins, they're going to get money towards creating whatever solution that they create. But the cool thing is that also, like, the way that we're voting, we're doing an audience vote, and people are voting with their dollars.
Come on.
And so, so even if, you know, the group that doesn't win, if other people believe in your idea, they're putting money behind it. You know, they can vote.
You're crowdsourcing that idea. I love that.
Exactly. And so, again, like I said, the cool thing is for those that don't win, they're still getting something out of it because of the classes that we're introducing them to. And also, like, just the stories. Like, so every session that we have, we'll bring in another entrepreneur who sort of had challenges as they created whatever they created. And one of the first ones, I didn't know him personally. My wife knew him. And so he created this app where, you know, if the police comes, you can hit a button and it records the situation. And it also alerts your friends of what's going on. but he started this way before sort of everything started popping off, right? And it came from the idea that he just got pulled over so many times, and he didn't understand why, and he wanted to feel more secure and protected. But the crazy part, he wasn't a tech guy. He knew nothing about code, right? And so he was like, I need to build this. Let me reach out to my network to see who can build an app or something like that for me. And so anyway, I don't want to dilute his story. I'll let that be.
No, I love that.
But it's like you get inspired because number one, you don't have to have, as we talked about before, this huge foundation of tech in order to create something in tech. But two, like he's a local guy, sort of like your average guy who experienced everyday problems, and he took that problem and made a business out of it. And so that
I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, that's all good business. Every good business that I know exists to solve a real problem in the world. And to the extent that you're able to solve it smoothly at scale, like that's where the value and the money starts coming back. But ultimately, you better be solving a real problem, whether you're in a service-based business or a product-based business. You're really trying to solve something. And I think that fuel, that fire is the entrepreneurial spirit. I was just on a podcast yesterday, and we were talking about kind of how you were able to break down tech to this really accessible standpoint. I think we can break down entrepreneurship, that anybody who's innovating and solving a problem has a bit of that entrepreneurial spirit. Like you can say, hey, you know, my living room isn't quite laid out to entertain guests. Well, let me solve that. Like, let me, you know, make a solution that makes this more conducive to entertaining. Well, that's the entrepreneurial spirit.
Mary Kondo, right?
You've made something better.
Right.
Immediately. You know, we can take a lot of this, you know, stigma and whatever out of entrepreneurship. You know, even when I give talks, I'll ask, okay, well, how many people here are entrepreneurs? Raise your hand. It might be, you know, 20% of the room. Well, if you say, okay, well, how many people have a side hustle? Or how many people are, you know, doing something creative to make money? You know, 80% of the room or more, it's like, well, no, y'all are entrepreneurs. You just don't associate yourself as an entrepreneur. And I wonder how that translates in tech. Like you're already in tech, you just don't associate yourself as a tech entrepreneur, especially in the Black community. And I want to hear more about that. What is it like being Black in tech? There's a big open-ended question, you know, really. But like, and now you're somebody who's identified as, I am Black and I'm in tech. Like you have those identifiers, like you're a tech person, you know. So that what is it like living into that space? What does that look like for you? And what have been some of the challenges that you've experienced in that space?
So I think honestly the biggest thing is mindset. It really is. I haven't experienced sort of like any racism directly or anything like that. Honestly, I think it's, and I don't know how deep you want to go. We can go deep, but
we can go deep, man. We don't live in the kiddie pool over here on this podcast.
Yeah, I think like, and I was talking to somebody about this not too long ago. Two things. So I go to therapy, and so when I was in therapy, like I've always felt. Oh, appreciate that.
Yeah, no. So much love for that, man. That's something we need to see a lot more of.
Oh yeah. So personally, I haven't. So I started going to therapy and then I paused. But my wife and I, we have marriage therapy that we've been going to like for years. We actually had a session last night.
Okay, and you look happy, so.
I wasn't happy that
last night.
That's all. Hey, like the therapist said last night, sometimes, you know, you got to tackle tough issues, right? And so, you know, therapy isn't always going to feel good. But coming out of it, like I was super grateful for it. But anyway, going back to it. So when I was talking to my therapist, one of the things that came out was that like I had this huge fear because I felt like I wanted to, like, I felt like I was called to do something big, right? And so I associated that with like MLK, right? Not necessarily maybe even on that level,
Right.
But I was like, in my mind, I was keeping myself back because I'm like, if I do something as big as MLK, then I may get shot.
Wow. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like,
Right. If you disrupt to that level, right, disrupt the status quo or the way things have been or the historic, you know, kind of gatekeeping of society, right, then you are threatening something.
Exactly. And there may be larger consequences that, for me, I'm not willing to give. And so when I was talking to my therapist, who was white, he was like, he had asked me the question if Dr. King knew if what he did was going to lead him where he was going to go, do I still think he would have went through with it?
Wow.
And I was like, yeah. Because at the end of the day, like I read some of his material, like it mentioned that he was afraid in a lot of the scenarios that he was in, but he still believed in what he believed in, right? And so, and then we started talking about like the idea of regret, right? Like if I shrink back in fear, which one is going to hurt more, right? The idea that I could have did something and I didn't, or the fact that I did and, you know, I was able to accomplish this, whatever the end result may be. Right. And so anyway, like I said, we can get super deep on that.
No, I love that, man. Well, and that's where I think when people see you are a courageous human living into your purpose, but I think people mistake courage as fearlessness.
Right.
And I don't think it's the same thing. I think, you know, there's the quote that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination that something is more important than your fear, right? Like something has to be bigger to you than the fear that you're feeling, which is natural and normal. But when it starts to matter more than your feeling, you go ahead and you do it anyway. And that could just be the fear of failure. It could be the fear of whatever it is that's stopping you or holding you back. You know, something has to become more important. What solving that problem or whatever it is has to become more important than the fear that you're feeling. And that is courage. Courage is doing it anyway.
Exactly.
You know, so you now had the courage to step in and start this entire innovation hub. Talk about that piece of the journey because you saw a real gap, you saw a real problem, right? Talk about that piece of the journey of actually starting this innovation hub.
Yeah, what's crazy is even like our name, Macon Black Tech, right? When we look at the demographics of Macon, it's 55% African American, right? Majority. But the issue that we have here is that we have a lot of individuals who are African American, but they're sort of in like lower end jobs, right? Sort of like a cook in the back, and you know, it's nothing wrong with being a cook if that's your passion, right? If that's your desire, you know, you're building up. Maybe you want to own your own restaurant one day, right, or something like that. But it's a lot of individuals who are sort of in these like lower end jobs. And so it's like we wanted to create something that would empower individuals, right? And so even in the name itself, it was like, ooh, what's going to happen calling an organization Black?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so, but as you just mentioned before, it was like the idea that we want to be able to present like what we want to give to the community is larger than the fear of what may happen naming our organization this, right? And so you know, we're not hiding who we're targeting. And for us, it's like it's a no-brainer. If 55% of your community is able to go sort of from like these lower end jobs to tech jobs where, you know, you're making, you know, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 or whatever, how much better is that going to make the local economy in the region, right? And even the state. And so it makes sense to do this, but stepping out was definitely difficult, and we just had to push the go button. We just had to get it out there. And so not only that, we just had to put boots on the ground and just start, you know, calling people, creating events, going on social media. But again, a lot of it was getting past the things that were in our mind and just doing the work.
Sure. So now what's it looking like for you all now in terms of the next steps? I know you have the Make-a-thon coming up. You got those things. What's going on there as far as next steps for you guys?
Yeah, so it's so much, and so it's crazy, right? And I don't know where you stand on this.
Try me. This is good.
Huh?
I said try me.
Okay. like where you stand on the whole idea of only focus on one thing. So I have a little caveat, right? So I was listening. I don't know if you listen to Gary Vee.
Yeah, I love him. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
great.
So he mentioned that it's nothing wrong with trying multiple things, but if you figure out that you're the person that can't thrive while doing multiple things, then you need to focus on that one thing.
Right. Yeah, it's a big game of self-awareness.
Exactly. And so not everyone fits in this one bubble, like, hey, only you can, right? And so with that, the cool thing about what we're doing is everything that we do is related to tech, right?
Yeah.
From our consulting business to Macon Black Tech. And now we're actually opening pretty shortly soon, the space that we're in, we're going to be opening a tech co-working space.
Come on, man. Yes. Congratulations.
Appreciate that. And so we're really excited. We still doing like renovations and different things like that. But the crazy thing about doing more than one thing at a time is like these things take time to build, and so you want to be able to devote your time into one thing that's like, ooh, I got to get back over here. Then you're like, ooh, I got to run over here. But it's all beautiful again because I believe we're able to do it. Number one, it's my wife and I, so it's two people working on these various things. But also, again, everything is like all related. So when we do things, right, like with the co-working space, we're just sharing what we've done along the journey. Not that we've become like some gurus or anything like that, but we just want to be able to pull people with us as we grow.
Yeah,
and it's simply
making. Yes,
exactly. And so carrying that same theme of creating a safe space to innovate and also learn in tech, it's going to be the same thing with the co-working space. They're just going to have a physical space to do it in.
That's what I was going to say. The way I see it for you all is that it's a physical manifestation of the work that you've really been doing. Like you've been gathering people, you've been making space, you've been creating opportunities, and now you have a kind of a physical representation of community building, you know, which I think is absolutely beautiful and a necessary next step. All right. So I want to talk real practical now for our listeners. Some people who might be thinking of maybe starting a career in tech and they haven't been in tech before and feeling some of this either intimidation about the tech piece or not knowing how to navigate that world. Give us just a few practicals of how someone can really start moving forward in the tech space. Like what are kind of some practical things that people lean into that, because there are massive opportunities. And again, Black people are at the table a lot less than they should, you know, at a lot of these tables, or, you know, need to maybe create their own tables in some instances. So, you know, talk about that piece, especially for Black people looking at getting involved in, you know, one of the greatest opportunities of our lifetime.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of the opportunities in tech.
So one, again, I think it starts with mindset. Like just telling yourself like, hey, it's okay. You're probably going to fail.
Like, as a matter of fact, you should. Otherwise, you're probably dreaming too small.
Right. And then the second thing, YouTube University. Pretty much everything is on YouTube. All the things that are happening right now, Web3, the metaverse stuff, you know, NFTs, AI, machine learning, AR, augmented reality, all these various things. Like there's somebody who has done the research and they put a video because they're super interested in this sort of area. And so it's just like, I think I want to get into this specific area. I'm pretty sure you can find like 1,000 videos on this. And so, of course, with it being free, right, you are going to have to take the time to make sure you find quality videos.
Yeah, there's a lot of junk out there. Right.
Exactly. And the only way to know if you have quality is you keep watching other videos at the same time. And it's like, oh, that person didn't really know what they were talking about. This, now we're really getting into it, right? So, you know, mindset, going on YouTube University, learning the different things that you need to learn, and then actually applying what you learn, right? Just even if it's like the smallest thing. Like one of the things I just had to tell myself recently, I always have this thing in my head that, oh man, I gotta buy this laptop in order to do this work. I gotta buy, I gotta have the iPad in order to do proper sales with my clients. And it's like, no. Start with where you are. That's just an excuse.
Right.
Get it out of here. And so start with where you are, even if it's like, let me see if anybody is on Facebook or Instagram or whatever in my local community talking about these things. Go join up with them, start having those conversations, and even post on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Hey, anybody in the NFT space, let's talk.
Right.
Right? Like simple things. It really takes getting outside of yourself, getting past that fear of looking crazy or failing or looking stupid, and just really doing the work. I mean, that's practical. Like, just break down.
I love that, man. You're breaking it down so well. I love that. Now, you talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and especially again at this intersectional space that you live in, right? Like you're in Georgia, you're Black, you're in tech, you're collecting tech innovators, all these different types of things. I think imposter syndrome, no matter what industry, is something that a lot of people feel like. They feel like it's, they're not qualified, or they shouldn't be in the rooms that they're in, or at the table that they're in. I'd love you to give some more practical pieces, because I know that's something you're passionate about speaking on.
Oh, for sure. I think it's the same thing. Just putting yourself out there. Like, imposter syndrome, I believe, comes from this idea of not feeling adequate, right, or competent. And so when you do that, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to spend a whole week on YouTube before I can talk about the topic. Right. And what's crazy is when you get in, at least I found this about myself, and I surprised myself. Like, somebody asked me a question about cybersecurity, and I just start talking like blah 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 whatever. Yeah, you got to do this and you got to do that, and you're like, I knew that.
Right, that's in there, right? Yeah.
And so coming to the realization, especially if you've put in the work, like you've been in the industry long enough, it's like, just open your mouth. It's okay, even if it makes you. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting loud.
No, go. This is it, man. No, we're not toning down here.
Yeah, it's like, even if you feel like say you're in a boardroom, right? For me, that's when I'm doing like sales meetings with my different clients and stuff like that. Yeah. But if you're in a boardroom and you feel like you have the answer, right? Go ahead and spit it out. Right. Regardless of the response of the individuals. And of course, I'm gonna go ahead and put out there, it's easier for me to say now sitting in this seat versus when somebody else is in the actual room right at the table. But it's like, regardless of the response, you're gonna feel good that you went outside of yourself and did it. Yes. And so just like going to the gym, just like working out, the more that you do it, right, the easier it's gonna sort of become. Right, the more natural it's going to become, and you're going to want to do it more, right? Not become like this super arrogant, like egotistical person. It's like, no, like, I've done the research. I know this specific answer. Why? Because I studied, right? And so, boom, here you go. This is the solution. And then what do entrepreneurs do? If the people aren't answering the call, if they aren't taking advice, go build it yourself. Right, right. That's really what it comes down to. And so like really pushing yourself, like when you're in those moments, really pushing yourself to the next step. And sometimes you don't know that you're in those moments, and you realize, like, you look up, a whole years went by and you had all these plans and you didn't implement these plans. Instead of like beating yourself up in that moment, it's like you sit in a room. I talk to myself. I'm not gonna lie, I do. Like, and so I'm just like, Ariane, dude, come on. Let's get it.
You know what to do.
Exactly.
Right. And usually it's some sort of either fear or anxiety or insecurity holding you back, right? And we call it either perfectionism or whatever we label it as, or procrastination, but really it's probably some sort of anxiety that's having you procrastinate. You got to go a few levels deeper on that. I think that's just such practical advice, and I'm super curious now, because imposter syndrome, I think there is the confidence side that you spoke about, that hey, be confident in what you do have, and really lean into that. And I'm also seeing, it's almost like if you could blend confidence with humility, which they are not mutually exclusive, right? And say, hey, I'm confident about what I do have, and I'm humble about what I don't and vulnerable enough to say, hey, I don't have the answer. Something that came up earlier in our conversation, that the ability to ask that question, the ability to go out and say, hey, would you explain that a little further to me? And I think that actually, ironically, as we're having this conversation, is a way to overcome imposter syndrome.
Exactly.
Is through just the openness of, you don't have to pretend, you don't have to fake it till you make it.
Right.
And all this
Exactly.
advice, like, you get to be exactly who you are and where you are in the room. You don't have to posture and whatever in there. What do you think? Like, what's that sweet spot? Confidence, humility. Give me a little bit more on that, because this is stirring something for me.
Yeah, no, I think you what do they say? You hit the nail right on the head. I think like that's what I was alluding to when I mentioned, like, even though you're confident, you don't become arrogant, because I think arrogance is another form of like insecurity, right? Because you're
just
trying to put
shield
on this
your own
face.
heart. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you get to this place of like, it's okay for me to not have all the answers. It's okay for me to have questions, right? And the crazy part is, when you do that, people love to talk and love to talk about themselves, right? So when you ask somebody about this particular topic, they're like, huh, okay, let me pour into
I know
you.
something, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
And they end up either elevating you in some type of way, either in that specific moment by giving you more information, or you start to build a relationship with this person and it takes you to a whole nother level, right? And so I think, like, when you do come to this place where, like, I don't have to know everything, and don't get me wrong, like, because there's a lot of it's hard, because in dealing with sort of like the mindset stuff and environmental things, like, we are built to where we're forced to be good all the time, right? Either we're in this position where we're the only Black person, and so we're representing all Black people in this particular environment, or
which is exhausting and takes a toll.
Exactly. Or again, we're the first, and so because we're the first, we can't really mess it up because we're trying to bring other people through the door. And so those things are real. Like, when we talk about this, those things are real. But I believe that humility comes in the form of, like, let me reach out and get a mentor, right? Let me reach out. Let me see if there's anybody else out there who's sort of going through the same thing that I'm going through, and see if I can connect with anybody. Because when you're doing this work, it can get lonely very quickly. Even for my wife and I, right? Like, we have each other, but there are specific avenues that we work in specific ways. Like, she's more of the community person, whereas I'm more of the tech person. So I'm like hanging out with geeks and all this other stuff. And so, but even that, like, I can sort of get in my bubble, like, and just stay there. You know what I'm saying? And so, again, like, just pushing yourself out to get with people and just to be able to ask those questions. The moment you stop asking questions, that's when you've messed up.
Right. You're not learning anymore. I was just having that conversation with my 4-year-old, because she was asking me, we were driving by NCCU, a great institution here, Black institution in Durham. And she's like, what's that? And I said, well, it's a school for adults. It's like the easiest way I could kind of conceptualize, it's a school for adults. She's like, well, what do adults need to go to school for? Don't they know everything? And I said, no. No. And I was having this conversation. When you stop learning, you're dead. That's it, right? When you stop learning and stop growing and start thinking you know it all, it's like, no, you know more, a little more, but
a little bit more, right?
You realize you don't know.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think that mindset is key. And one thing I wanted to say, just live, for whoever is listening and can spread this message, if you are running and leading an organization and you have committed to some sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion over the last few years, especially, and you started to bring in 1-2 Black people into your organization, think about the culture and think about the environment that you're creating. It is exhausting being the only. It is exhausting feeling like you have to represent an entire race in an organization. It is exhausting. You come into Black employees whenever there's a quote Black issue going on, or whatever all of these things are. Like, really think about that, because the extra toll of code switching, the extra toll of feeling like you have to show up a certain way, I think is real and mentally and emotionally exhausting. So I just wanted to say that. Now, last question before we wrap up.
Sure.
What do you wish you knew at the start of your tech journey? What did you wish you knew earlier on as you were innovating and starting to solve some of these problems? What advice would you give yourself? And let's just even go back a year, just even 1 year, right? Like, what do you wish you knew a year ago that has been really helpful for where you are right now?
I think one, it's possible. So, and that sounds crazy, but 2021 was sort of like our biggest year. And even that is kind of crazy, right? COVID and all. Like 2020 and 2021 was definitely great. I mean, in terms of just growth, revenue growth, business growth, and even like I'll even be more transparent, right? Like when we got the loan from the SBA, right? That was the largest amount that we saw in our bank account at one time, right? I'm not gonna say what the amount was, but it was like, you know, we saw this amount and seeing that particular amount, although it is a loan, right? Because you gotta pay it back.
Right, but you
it
have
did
some
something.
runway.
It did something.
Yeah.
It made because I mean I didn't share this part, but I grew up in the hood, right? I pretty much kind of grew up poor, and I know it's like, oh, okay, everybody sort of like grew up poor, and now they, you know, started from the bottom. But I mean that is my story. So like seeing that, like when I got my first job, I was making a certain amount, and I sort of did the whole crazy, right? Buy a new car, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing to show for it, right? But
The status
like,
stuff, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But this time it was different. It was like it shifted my mindset. Like this, having this, it's possible to be able to earn this, and not only get this, but get this times like 10 or whatever. And so, like number one, it's possible, and two, just step out, just do it. Like it's okay. Just do it. It's okay.
And I know somebody watching on here needs to hear this. You have an idea that you've been sitting on for a long time, and you know that you have the pieces to at least take the first step. You don't have to have, and I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble, is they feel like they have to have it all figured out. They feel like they have to have the entire roadmap and all these things figured out before they even get started. It's like, no, the journey will equip you. Trust.
Exactly.
For sure. The journey will equip you, as you go. You will have what you need, but like, please take that first step. Somebody listening needs to hear this right now. This is for you. Take that first step and grow. All right, Ariane, you are incredible. You and Christelle are doing beautiful work in the world. I love how you're showing up. How do we get in touch with you specifically, you personally, and then both of the organizations that you're running? How do people reach out? And if you could explain a little bit more of HamTECH Solution, what you guys really do, what problems you really solve on that, I think that would be really helpful for our listeners as well. But give us the access.
Sure. So HamTECH Solutions is a cybersecurity firm, and so what we do is, to make it plain, we go into different organizations to try to find like threats and vulnerabilities in their system, and essentially we look for that, create a report, and then we help the companies fix those different things that we found. Right. That's the most basic explanation.
And thanks for breaking it down for us. People who still struggle. How do I get my machine? I still call it like my machine. I'm like like my friends call me Grandpa Jay. They're like, it's a phone, or like Twitters and anyway.
Exactly.
Thanks for breaking it down. That was super accessible.
For sure.
All right. And then how do we get in touch with you at HamTECH Solutions? How do we get in touch with you at Macon Black Tech?
So all of my handles are HamTECH, which is HAMTECHS. So hamtechs.com, and then social media is HamTECH. And then with Macon Black Tech, same thing. The handle Macon Black Tech, Macon is MACON, and then Black Tech. And then also have a podcast. I know it sounds crazy, like all these things that we're doing, but anyway, Hood to Tech is HOOD. If you want to hear more of my story, HOOD, TO, and then TECH. Again, that social media handles should be that. And yeah, then Christelle, all her stuff is just Christelle Parham. So, and then my stuff is Ariane Parham, LinkedIn, and so
love it. Yeah. So I just dropped Ariane's connect in LinkedIn, specifically in the chat of this live stream here. So make sure you connect with him in all of those ways. Follow the journey, support in whatever ways you can, because especially the work that you're doing at Macon Black Tech and space making there, I think a lot of my listeners here would be very interested in that. Oh, actually, we got some connects in here. Oh, see, this is so fun. I love this stuff so much. LinkedIn, thank you for being here. It's been great. You know, I love hosting it here on LinkedIn because I feel like the community here is so rich. Christelle, what's going on? Hey, come in here. Come closer. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Okay, Christelle, you get like 2 minutes of fame right now. You're hopping in. You gotta we were putting you on. So one, your husband loves you like crazy. We're talking about you, and he said, "Look at even how he's looking, y'all." He said y'all did a marriage counseling, and he's even more in love than ever. That's what he said. Facts. That's what he said. So, Christelle, would you just introduce yourself briefly so people can know the other founder of Macon Black Tech? Yeah, what you got going on, Christelle?
Hey y'all, I'm Christelle Parham, one of the co-founders of Macon Black Tech, and also when I'm not working on Macon Black Tech, working on HamTECH Solutions, and we're getting ready. Did you tell them we're getting ready to launch CredeX Labs? Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what we're doing.
I love it. I love it, Christelle. I'm so glad you made it on. This is great.
Yeah, it was I just got back from the doc. Well, yeah.
No, that's great. We're getting it in. We're getting it in. All right, y'all. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here, Christelle and Ariane. You've been wonderful. Again, LinkedIn, thanks for joining us. You could be anywhere during this time. And like I say, always say, time is the most valuable thing we have. And you chose to spend an hour with us here. And I do not take that lightly at all. So thank you for being here. Share this with your networks to whoever you think would find this helpful, especially again in the Black tech and innovation space. If you could just hit the share button at the bottom of this LinkedIn conversation, that would mean a lot to me, because we got to get these messages out, you know, the people who are doing this type of work. So much love to you, man. Keep it up.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in.
Of course.